Thank you for the question. I was first elected to the Portage County town of Grant in April of 2005, and I've had both the honor and the privilege of serving the town of Grant residents since that time. It's a really wonderful, challenging, and at times frustrating position, but I really do like the ability to reach out, especially one-to-one to town residents. I like the sense of helping people. I like local government. I like the idea that people are very close to their local government and engaged with local government. The last 14 years has given me a great opportunity to meet some wonderful people, to learn more about the Portage County town of Grant. I've been a resident there since 1983, and it's my home. It's where I have lived. It's where I have a family. It's where children have gone to school, and also engaged in the local community, Wisconsin Rapids, as well as Stevens Point area. But the Portage County town of Grant is a wonderful place. It's unique because of its size, being a double town, because of the number of roads, because of its rural, its residential, its agricultural, and its conservation lands. I can't think of anything else I'd like to be doing at the present time other than to represent you again as chairperson for the town of Grant. Well, I'd like to continue on the track that we've been doing. I really would like to continue with our outstanding recycling and solid waste efforts. They're some of the best in the state. We, in fact, received an award a few years ago for having the highest recycling rates in a 10-county area, or in our region, for the state of Wisconsin. I'd like to continue on that track. I'd like to continue on our track regarding planning and zoning. We have an independent zoning committee, planning committee. I'd like to continue on that. I like the fact that we have a more regular newsletter, of which I oversee now, that we have a Choose to Reuse program. We have tire days. We have had a really active program getting and receiving grants from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, the Local Roads Incentive Program, as well as the Local Roads Incentive Discretionary Program, of which we received hundreds of thousands of dollars during my tenure. I really like writing those grants. I'd like to see us get even more, which allow us to get very, very good roads that are both engineered and also have the longevity that's required by the Department of Transportation. I'd like us to do more outreach and education on all aspects. I'd like us to see us be more inventive when it comes to our employee-employer relationships, on how we outreach and get more volunteers involved. I'd like to see us just continue to do the good things that we're doing. But for me personally, I want to continue on the track that we're doing. I think we are very progressive as compared to some of the other municipalities in Portage County, certainly more independent than the others, and I really want us to retain that independence under my tenure. Like all municipalities, the major issue is the lack of funding as it relates to transportation. For example, as I mentioned, the town of Grant is a double town. So most towns are 36 square miles. We're 71.5 square miles, and with that comes a much larger road system. We have 116 miles of roads, whereas most municipalities have anywhere from like 40 to maybe 60 miles of roads. So geographically, we're enormous. And we only get, this Wisconsin Department of Transportation provides a program where they do reimburse you funds for their transportation aids, of which we get about $278,000. So just over $2,000 per mile of road. But to give you an example, when we hard surface a road, when we did Lake Road a few years ago, just that half a mile, and granted that was a very complicated road reconstruction, just that half a mile cost nearly $250,000. So it ate almost our entire budget just to do a quarter-mile of roads. We are desperately in need of additional road aid. That is, hopefully, it has improved over the last few years. As I mentioned earlier, there are more Wisconsin Department of Transportation grant aids available. We need to tap into absolutely everything we can in order to help us supplement what we can get from our tax base, which is very little for roads. We need to tap into other sources in order to get enough funds in order for us to maintain our roads. Some of them are, of our 116 miles of roads, only about a third of them are hard surfaced, and the rest of them are either gravel, granite, earth, sand. They don't have very much structure, and with more and more pressure on our roads coming from particularly implements of husbandry, we just really need the funds in order to support and create better structure for these roads. That's the biggest challenge. I don't know that one's going to be solved anytime soon. I know some of our representatives, Katrina Shanklin a few years ago, asked for information from various municipalities on how much time, based on the money you have, it would take to fix your roads. And then following that, the Wisconsin Towns Association did something similar. To give you an example, hard surface roads should be reconstructed, if possible, every 20 to 40 years, 60 years max. The current trajectory that most towns are on is something like in the order of 267 years before we can really replace roads that need reconstruction. It's completely unrealistic, and it's the biggest challenge that we face. Water quality is a problem in most of the Central Sands communities. The town of Grant's soil structures are basically, if it's not muck, it's plain field sands, and those sands sit about 100 feet over some bedrock material. So sands, because of their structure, have very, very, very little ability to attenuate pollutants. So pollutants that affect us move pretty fast, down gradient of where the pollutant comes from. The result of that is that people who have tested their wells, and during my tenure we've had a couple homeowner programs where we specifically have a week or so where people can collect their bottles at various locations, and then we have a group meeting where everyone gets their results. Their results are private, but then we have an educator from the university that explains what those results mean. But we have problems with nitrate contamination that sometimes comes from people's own septic systems or can come from agricultural fields. We have problems with bacterial contamination that typically can come from the same sources, but typically those are problems with people's wells. We have extremely soft water, and the result is that they're far more, and our water is far more acidic than some of the other water in other parts of the state. So we have very acid water. The result of that is that in some cases we have some leaching with lead or copper from the pipes because it has a very low pH. We also have, just corrosivity problems in general. So the answer to your question is yes, we have problems with groundwater quality, and a lot of these things can be solved, but unfortunately, some people don't want to know what their water is like. They feel that information will somehow be shared. So there's been kind of a reluctance for people to get their wells tested as they should. Typically, the recommendation for people that have private wells is they should test at a minimum of every 15 months. So hopefully they'll do that on their own. If not, other communities in Portage County are getting more active with the homeowner programs, and that's something I'd like to see us do that again in the next couple of years, where we have outreach to individuals. They come in collectively, they get their wells tested, and then there's an education session so they can understand what those parameters mean, whether they're safe or unsafe, particularly if women are pregnant and have children under 6 months of age. The issue of nitrate is extremely important to know. It's a really good question. It's a real sore spot. It remains so. this started really soon after I came on the board. I came on in 2005, and in 2007, Portage County decided that there was a little change in the law where counties could exceed their levy limit. We're all held to a 0% increase in our taxes or the percentage of net new construction. And that's true for counties as well. But there was an exemption where if they had emergency management services, that they could exceed their levy limit. So they decided to exceed their levy limit and then basically bill everybody for the ambulance service. It was their means of paying the city of Stevens Point Fire Department, who they were contracting with for ambulance. Well, our treasurer at the time, Dorothy Rosh, pointed that out to me, and she and I attended several meetings, and we're like, well, wait a minute. We don't contract with Portage County. We contract with, at the time, was Higgins Ambulance Service. And there was a small percentage, a large percentage geographically, but a small percentage in terms of the number of homes that were being covered by Portage County. But we said, this isn't fair. You need to include us in your levy, or you need to exclude us and not bill our residents. Well, that didn't happen. We did argue for a couple years with them on the matter, and then for 2 years, in 2009 and 2010, they did reimburse the town of Grant for the cost of its ambulance contract with Higgins, which was very good of them. And then in 2011, they contracted directly, which was then United Ambulance Service, because the Higgins was sold to Gary Johnson and his family, and it is currently now United Emergency Medical Services, which we use and contract to this day. They contracted directly with United, and that went okay, but what happened is that the county asked them to make changes, their radio system and other things, and so the money that they had to expend kind of offset what they got from the county, and it became a losing proposition for them financially. As a result, in 2012, negotiations with United and the county broke down. So we said, that's fine. Why don't we just go back to reimbursing us like you've done in the past? You don't have to contract with them directly. We'll continue to contract with them directly. And we also changed it so that United would cover the entire town of Grant. We no longer had any part that Stevens Point was covering. Well, they wouldn't do that, and so we filed a paper that says that we have the right to sue them if this can't be resolved. And in 2013, there was a couple years where we went back and forth again. Finally, in 2014, we did sue. And we sued over double taxation without representation. We said, you can't force us to pay for something that we already have an existing contract for. And unfortunately, Portage County has no contracts with any municipality. They just assume everybody wants Stevens Point, and now there's also a contract with Amherst, and most recently there's been a contract with Plover Fire Departments. But the town of Grant has its own contract. We're the only ones in Portage County that actually have a contract with a provider, which is what the statutes require. And so we felt not only are they taxing us without representation, but they're also violating the statutes because they don't have contracts with those individual municipalities who may or may not want the fire departments to cover them for ambulance, which they've chosen. Long story short, we lost on the circuit court level. On the circuit court level, we thought for certain we would win. At the appellate court level, we did not. So the way it stands now, the town of Grant residents pay out of their general tax fund, we pay United Emergency Medical Response about $41,000 a year. In addition, the town of Grant residents from their county tax pay Portage County $63,000 a year for an ambulance service we do not use. So the town of Grant basically pays $100,000 and nearly 2/3 of that is something we don't use. It's a very unfortunate situation. We still feel the situation is wrong. The new county executive has said he will try to find other means to make this right, but we've not seen any action to date, and I don't hold out that much hope that it'll be resolved unless there's actually legislation that makes this kind of activity. I might add, Portage County is the only one in the state of Wisconsin doing this, these shenanigans, for lack of a better word. I feel that the only way this will end is with legislation, making it illegal. That's a good question. The issue of ATVs and UTVs came up first in 2008, and we had a small group of individuals that thought that they would like to see ATVs and UTVs in the town of Grant. And at that time, we had a lot of people come to a special meeting to talk about the pros and cons, and we had a long list of the things that we had questions for the ATVers at the time that we thought we needed resolved. Well, it kind of fizzled, and we didn't really hear much about it again until 2016. And at that time, the town of Pine Grove, which adjoins us, and the town of Saratoga in Wood County, which adjoins us, had made some inroads on ATV, UTV use. The town of Saratoga has had it for some time, and they have select roads. Not every road in the town of Saratoga is open to ATV use. And the town of Pine Grove, which is to our east, opened up all their roads. So the ATV UTV Club, the Saratoga ATV UTV Club, came to the town of Grant in 2016 and said, we would like to connect, we'd like to have some connectivity between those municipalities that have and don't have ATVs. So this went directly to the town of Grant Plan Commission. As I mentioned, the town of Grant has its own Plan Commission. We are not under county zoning. We're the only one in Portage County that has its own zoning. And so it was relatively easy for our Plan Commission to really look at this and say, well, what do we want to do? I have to really hand it to the Plan Commission, which is chaired by Jim Wendels. He's been the chair for a long time, that they took a very comprehensive approach. They looked at ATV ordinances around the state and even out of the state to see what kinds of things do they include. How comprehensive are they? And so we came up with an ATV ordinance that looked at the state ones, and we looked at various municipalities of similar size to us, and we came up with one that was really good, but somewhat restrictive in the way it was designed. It had to follow all the ATV UTV's rules. Those things are included and referenced, but it also had some restrictions when it came to the time of year. One of our other supervisors, Supervisor Jim Yetter, who's also a first responder, felt that the time frame should be, close them down in November, open them up in May, so we didn't have the issue of in the winter time. We also were restricting it basically to daylight hours, so there was times they weren't going to be driving at night. So it was more restrictive in its approach, and it did create the connectivity that the ATV Club requested, and that was that you could get from Saratoga on Tower Road, you could get from Saratoga to Pine Grove and vice versa. And then we have amended it several times so that you could also get up 90th Street and get up to one of the tavern establishments. So there's a number of ways that you could get to at least one place of business in the town of Grant, in addition to connecting some of the municipalities. Since then, there's been several amendments to it. Now that Plover is open, we can also go up Town Line Road and get to Plover. So we're connecting those municipalities that have either fully open, partially open, or like us, select roads that are open to create that sense of connectivity. It's been controversial because there's some that feel that every road should be open, that there should be no restrictions. But we've had a lot of pushback from, for example, the school. Grant Elementary School is in the town of Grant. That's part of the Wisconsin Rapids School District. And they feel very strongly that we should not have ATVs, UTVs in and around the school, nor in the subdivisions that abut it. We've also heard from the county. Municipalities have the ability to designate a county road as an ATV route if it is 35 miles per hour or less. Well, the county has made it very clear that they're not interested in reducing any of the speed limits that are currently 55 or 45 in the town of Grant in order to accommodate ATVs, UTVs. So even if we, the town of Grant, were to open up all of our roads to ATVs, UTVs, there's still areas that people can't get to by virtue of the fact that the speed limit does not allow that on county roads. So what we decided to do most recently, as a result of in every municipality, every town has an annual meeting. In April of last year, there was a motion, and an annual meeting is one in which all the residents are on equal footing. Anything can come off the floor. There's really no agenda, and people can put forth ideas. So there was an idea last year that we should have a referenda on this matter. So in this spring election, there is a referendum on the ballot. And the questions are, A, should we designate all roads as ATV routes? B, should we designate no roads in the town of Grant as ATV routes? Or C, shall we designate select roads in the town of Grant based on its impact to health, safety, and welfare of residents? So we are looking for a response from our electors to see what they really want. But it is important to note that these types of referendum are non-binding and they're advisory only, because ATVs, UTVs are not something towns have to do. Doesn't even necessarily have to be on our radar screen. It's not a mandate by the state or the county to say you have to designate roads. In fact, a lot of municipalities just have trails. So they're all on private lands, and then maybe you cross over on a town road. But for some reason, in the town of Grant, people don't want to do the work necessarily for trails, and they want them to just be on our roads. So it's a very controversial issue, and I hope I wasn't too long-winded, but I have to tip my hat to the Plan Commission that did a really good job of putting together the ordinance, that have been really smart about as we've been amending it. And I think this kind of staggered, slow approach to it is beneficial for the town of Grant, so that people can really feel if this is something they want in their neighborhood or abutting their house or not. So we'll see what the referenda says, and we'll take it from there. Thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, I've been a town of Grant resident full-time since 1983. It's my home. I love it here. I really love the challenge of being your representative as the town of Grant chairperson. It's challenging, it's exciting, it's great to be able to talk one-to-one on people and hopefully do things that protect people's health, safety, and welfare. The town of Grant is a beautiful combination of agricultural lands, of conservation lands, of low and high residential use, and of just rural, beautiful homes and lands that are really nice here in central Wisconsin. I'm proud of the work that I've done when it comes to transportation aids. I'm proud of the work that we all have done when it comes to recycling and solid waste. I'm extremely proud of our independence, of our independent plan commission with our own zoning, as our independence responsible unit for recycling and solid waste, for our employees that help us, particularly now this winter with our snow plowing and all the public works that needs to be involved, whether it's mowing or grading or snow plowing. There's a lot of hardworking people in the town of Grant, and I'm really proud of them, and I'm really proud of the work we've done. I like the newsletter, our Choose to Reuse, our outreach, our education, our ability, I think, to hopefully feel that people can just pick up a phone and feel like they'll be heard. I'm proud of that personally. If somebody calls me, it's rare if I don't get back to somebody in 24 hours. And even though I may not be able to help them with their problem at the moment, I at least feel that I've always been responsive to people that call me. And if that's not the case, let me know. I hope I'm going to be your chairperson for the next couple of years. So I do hope I can garner your vote for another time. Thank you.